Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Renew Plus. I'm Pastor Tony. Thank you for joining us here at midweek of week number 5 of our Access Road, Grace and Peace. We're learning from Jesus, from the Word of God, how to walk and live this life of rest and peace that He will teach us if we will learn. And of course, all of this is in the Word of God. Now, I want to go over to John's Gospel today. Big John, as we like to say, the Gospel of John, chapter 14, to some things that Jesus said to His disciples right before He went to the cross. And of course, right before He went to the cross, He began to say some things to them, teach them some things, and prepare them for His departure and what He was about to do, what He was about to accomplish in His death, burial, resurrection, and ascension to God. And of course, what life would look like after that happened, what life under the new covenant looks like. And so He began to teach them and say some things to them He had not said previously. So we want to get in on that. We want to, because this is the Lord teaching us how to walk in this new covenant, this covenant of peace that we're talking about. Now, John chapter 14, verse number 27, Jesus is speaking, teaching, and He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you." Now, I want you to see right there that of all the things that Jesus could have given us as something left behind when He left, He gave us and made sure that we had His peace. He says, "Peace I leave with you." In other words, I'm going to take this back to heaven with me and leave you down here stranded. He said, "I'm leaving you peace." And listen, this is not just any old peace right here. He's distinguishing right here. He says, "My peace I give to you." So you know what? Jesus left us His very own peace. So, notice that already this week and in this series, we talked about that this new covenant that He is already breaking right here and establishing for all of us as believers is a covenant of peace. And notice also that He gave us His own peace and left that behind for all of us. We said, well, why am I not walking in more? Why is it not manifesting more in my life? Well, again, we have to go back to other things we've said this week. You have to come and be taught by Jesus. You have to come and learn from Him and take His yoke upon yourself. And again, His yoke is easy. His burden is light. See, even though we have these things, even though Jesus has left these things with us, we have them at our disposal, you still have to learn to operate in them. We have to learn the ways of peace, the mindset of peace. Today we all are pretty much familiar with a lot of technological advances, a lot of technological equipment, and a lot of that we have in our own household. In fact, you probably are carrying around one right now. You may be even watching this podcast on one of these devices right now, an iPod, an iPad, or an iPhone or something similar to that. We're not doing an advertisement for Apple or Mac for any reason, but these kind of devices are heavy technology. And even though you go into the store, big box store, something like that, and you purchase an iPhone, a smartphone, what we like to call it, just because you have that in your possession doesn't mean you know how to operate in it or how to use it to its full potential. Those things, and I haven't even tapped in. I've had a smartphone for years, still haven't even tapped in probably half of what that thing can do. But in that device is the potential of doing all kinds of stuff. Having apps, and of course those apps give us access and entrance into other worlds of things in our life. And of course we can call people, we can send people text messages or some kind of a picture you just took. Instantly you can send it to somebody and they can see the same thing you're seeing. So these pieces of technology have the potential of doing so much stuff, but you still have to learn how to operate it. See, we have peace, and its potential is awesome in our life. But just because Jesus left it, just because you have it at your disposal, in your possession, doesn't mean that you necessarily know how to use it and how to get the most out of that potential of peace in our life. So we still have to go back. If I want to learn how to use an iPhone, that's an Apple product, I have to go back to the manufacturer and I have to find out from them. I have to learn from them how to operate in that system so I get the most out of it. Well, see, that's the same way it is with peace. But I'll have to say this: the things that God gives us are not near as complicated or complex as the things that we get from men. All right, but we do have to go back to the originator of that peace to find out how to operate in it to get its full potential out and for it to benefit us in our life. So that's what Jesus is saying right there. He's saying, I've left you my own peace. And again, notice he distinguishes right here. He says, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you. So notice he's making a distinction between his peace that he gave us, that he left for us, and the peace that the world offers. Now, the peace that the world offers is fragile. It is fleeting. It's temporary. In other words, it's based on something that is fragile, that can change. Why? Because the world's peace are all based on external circumstances, possessions, how much money you have, those kind of things right there. Those things can change day by day. If you're basing your peace on anything external like the world does, the peace, the world's kind of peace is the absence of conflict with another individual or war or something like that. Well, how many of you know that you're not going to go probably too many hours without experiencing some kind of maybe a conflict or somebody just doesn't like you? And if your peace is based on somebody else's acceptance or approval, you're in trouble. Your peace is going to be fragile and very temporary. The world's peace is based on possessions. In other words, they have in their mind, if I could just get enough money, if I could just get enough assets, enough in my portfolio, then I'll have peace in my life. Well, you find out that people who have, all of the things that people say they want to have, once they get it, then they still aren't at peace because they're worried about how to try to keep it, how to maintain it. I tell you, there is just infinite avenues of things to worry about in life. And if your peace is based on anything external, anything in the natural realm, anything according to men, is going to be very temporary. And I can tell you the kind of peace that the world comes up with, many times it's a pseudo peace where they offer a substance, some kind of external substance in order to gain a temporary peace. In other words, what I mean by that is more of a feeling of peace than an actual fruit or a spiritual substance of peace. It's more of a feeling or an emotion than anything else. And emotions and feelings, boy, they'll change. They'll change hundreds of times a day. So we're not looking for just a feeling of peace, just an emotion of peace. We're looking for the substance of Jesus' peace working in our life. And of course, the world, many times they'll, get into substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, any kind of addiction you can possibly think of. Most of those are rooted in them trying to get peace in their life, even for a temporary relief. And I tell you, it just doesn't happen. A lot of people say, well, if I could just go on vacation, I'll have peace. Well, you may go on vacation, may get away, may go to an island somewhere or a mountain somewhere. You have temporary peace. But what happens when you come back home? Well, that whatever that stole your peace before you left will rob it when you get back. It's sitting there waiting on you. And you know what? A lot of people, when they go on vacation, they really don't know how to go on vacation because they pack up all their problems in their baggage and take it with them. So really, when they're off on vacation, they're still worrying about and burdened down with the cares of life. Now, we don't have to wait to go on vacation to learn or to experience peace in our life and relaxation and rest. We can learn the ways of rest from the Master. We'll be at rest and peace even in the middle of turmoil, even in the middle of bad circumstances, negative things happen in our life. And see, this is again why we have to go to Jesus and learn the ways of peace. Learn how to operate in the peace that he left us. Now again, he distinguished between the world's peace and his own peace. His peace is not fragile. It is not fleeting. It's not temporary. It's eternal. It's not rooted in some kind of worldly, external, natural thing or an emotional feeling. Jesus' peace is all rooted in spiritual truths and realities. First of all, in our relationship with God. When we're at peace with God, when we have a right relationship with him, as we've already discovered, then that should result in the fruit of peace bearing in our life. Because really, if I'm at peace and in right relationship with the Most High God, with the Almighty, there's nothing bigger than him. And there's really nothing he can't do. And listen, this is the other end of that. For his children, there's nothing he won't do. There is not anything he won't do for his kids. Now, again, we don't want to get into, what about, some kind of illegal. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things that would actually produce a benefit in our life. Now, I want you to see that Jesus said, I'm leaving you my peace. We still have to learn how to operate in it, walk in the ways and the mindset of this peace. But Jesus said, I'm leaving this peace for you. Now, notice what he goes on to say after this. Let's just read in its entirety again. Verse 27, peace I leave with you. Jesus is talking. He says, my peace I give to you. Now, he's not just talking to his disciples. He's talking to all believers under this new covenant. See, we have to remember that the context of what Jesus is speaking right here is right after he instituted what we call the Lord's Supper or communion. Now, that's not just a religious formality. That's not just a religious ritual we do once a month and, we kind of get a cracker and some juice and that kind of stuff, but we really don't understand what it was. What was Jesus doing when he instituted the Lord's Supper? He was actually establishing the new covenant. He said, this is the new covenant in my blood. As often as you do this, do it in remembrance of me, of what Jesus did for us. Jesus ended the old covenant. He fulfilled it. And then he began or established a new covenant. What is this new covenant we're talking about? We've already looked at it this week. It is the covenant of peace. It's the covenant of peace. And see, this is in context. He had just done this. He had just instituted the Lord's Supper and established and originated the new covenant, by his death, burial, resurrection. So this is why he's saying what he did. He's leaving this as part of the benefits and the inheritance of the new covenant. So he not only just left it for the disciples, he left it for all believers, all of us for all time. So he said, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Now I want you to see that Jesus gave us something first. But then we have a responsibility to do something with what he gave us. First of all, we have to receive this gift of peace, his peace that he left with us. But notice, we have to have the responsibility of not letting our heart be troubled. And I know, again, like I pointed out yesterday, that's a lifestyle with a lot of people. I mean, they have a lifestyle where they let everything, they worry about everything. They make mountains out of molehills, and they just leave their heart unguarded, and their heart is just continually troubled over and over again about everything. And, if there's not something to worry about, they worry about what's on the horizon. In other words, if everything's going good, then there must be something really bad on the horizon. Or if one shoe drops, they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. They live a lifestyle of having their hearts troubled, leaving their heart unguarded. Jesus is telling us this is our responsibility for walking in his peace. He says, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Now, listen, notice right here, he's talking about not being in fear. How many times does God tell his people to fear not? I think there's like 365 times in the Bible, the Lord instructs us to not be afraid, to fear not, to do not fear. Now, is that important? Well, obviously it is. because fear in our heart indicates that we are leaving our heart unguarded and we're allowing it to be troubled about something. We're worrying about something. Now, I'm going to get into this as we go and explain why that's the reality, why that's true, and how to get rid of it. But notice here, he says, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Now see, we're going to have thoughts of fear and trouble that enter into your head. They can be isolated thoughts that come in. You can see things. See, we're inundated with images and visions and words that would produce trouble and fear if we allow them to. But notice, what's in your head doesn't have to get down in your heart. Seeds that are sown on the ground do not have to germinate and take root and start bearing fruit down in your heart and in your life. See, Jesus is telling us right here that we can guard our heart and keep it from being troubled. Not every bird that flies over your head should have access to your hair to build a nest in it. Somebody said it this way one time: you can't do anything about the birds flying over your head, but you can certainly do something about those birds landing on your head and building a nest in your hair. You do not have to allow every thought, isolated thought, and image entering into your head of trouble and worry and fear to get down in your heart and begin to entertain those things. In fact, Jesus is telling us right here, don't let your heart be troubled. This is imperative for us walking in His kind of peace. We're going to take up there again tomorrow and get on into this a little further as we go. But if you'd like additional materials, go to tonycowan.org. Join us tomorrow as we pick up from here. There's some awesome things we got to cover this week and next week concerning this. We'll see you tomorrow.